to meet it. This as incumbent Senator Bill Nelson and his Republican challenger, Rick Scott, brace for another potential recount that could stretch into the weekend. Peter Doocy is reporting live from the Broward County Board of Elections. So, Peter, why did a judge just deny an extension to today's deadline?
Dana, it's because Palm Beach County can't even tell this judge how much longer they might possibly need to count all their votes. And so the judge, Mark Walker, just ruled this a few minutes ago. He says this court must be able to craft a remedy with knowledge that it will not prove futile. It cannot do so on this record. This court does not and will not fashion a remedy in the dark. That follows an announcement that Palm Beach County's recount total is a lot different than their initial count.
When the machines went down, they lost some of the counts that we had.
How much did you lose?
Well, it depends on what precinct. And so we have more than a dozen precincts that lost substantial numbers of ballots.
So the Nelson campaign and the Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee were denied that extension today. And just to point out, we are whispering because the canvass board is in session right now. You can hear the canvassing board chair going through certain ballots saying yes or no as they continue the process with less than an hour to go until the deadline here. Dana.
You have a very good whispering voice, Peter, I must say. And if you can, and I know you're not bugging them because they're not telling you to shush, Democrats are claiming victory after a different ruling, though. Tell us about that.
Right. That same judge, Mark Walker, ruled this morning that if Florida voters are just now finding out that the signature on their ballot did not match the signature on the voter files, then they have until Saturday at 5 p.m. to fix it. And so the judge, that is something that the Nelson campaign says was a win for them. Their lawyer, Mark Elias, says this, a victory for all voters of Florida. Judge sides with Nelson, rules Florida law on matching ballot signatures being applied unconstitutionally. But the Scott team is pushing back. They say we are immediately appealing this baseless decision, and we are confident we will prevail in the 11th Circuit. Let's be clear, Bill Nelson's high-priced Washington lawyers went to court to argue against a process that they previously argued for. And we also do now expect there will be some questions this afternoon about whether or not that judge needs to recuse himself, because some recently surfaced FEC records show that in the past his wife has donated to Nelson campaigns. Dana.
All right, Peter Doocy, thank you for staying on top of it. We're less than an hour away. We'll be back in touch with you. Meantime.
In my caucus to be Speaker of the House. And certainly we have many, many people in our caucus who could serve in this capacity. I happen to think that at this point, I'm the best person for that.
Nancy Pelosi making her case earlier today for why she should be elected the next Speaker of the House. This as potential Democratic challenger is emerging. Pelosi opponents pushing Ohio Congresswoman Marcia Fudge for the past day or so. Fudge telling the Washington Post, over the last 12 hours, I've been overwhelmed by the amount of support I've received, adding, things could change rapidly. I'm joined now by Karl Rove, former White House Deputy Chief of Staff and a Fox News contributor, one of my good friends. And I want to ask you first about Nancy Pelosi. You write about this in your column today. Do you think that she might not end up as the Speaker again?
Well, she's got a lot of work to do to make that happen. And the Democrats have, looks like they're going to end with about 233 members in the House. That's a gain of 40 seats, and it gives them a margin of 15 seats over the 218, which is needed to be the majority in the House. She needs to get 218 votes to be Speaker. The problem is there are 12 incumbent Democrats, including Marcia Fudge, who have said, I'm not supporting her. There were 10 newly elected freshmen, at least 10, who said, I'm not supporting her. And then there were 4 Democrats who were leading when I wrote my column, but not yet declared winners. Since then, 2 of them have been declared the winner. That's 26 Democrats in the House who would say, I'm not going to vote for Nancy Pelosi. That drops her below the 218 that she would need in order to be elected Speaker of the House.
And so what you're saying is even if you wanted to abstain and not have your first vote be for Nancy Pelosi, Pelosi doesn't have enough votes to get to 218 if all of those people you just mentioned were to abstain.
Well, if they all abstain, that's called voting present. And for every 2 people who say, I'm voting present, that reduces the number of votes needed to get elected from 218 to like 217 and so forth. So theoretically, that could reduce the number of people that were needed to 205. But there's also a pool of some 30 people who during the course of the campaign refused to answer the question, and 10 of whom went on record, 15 of whom went on the record sort of being explicit that they were deliberately not going to make a decision until later. You get a handful of those, and you could end up in a place where theoretically there are less than 202, which is the number of Republicans there are. There are less than 202 Democrats who support Nancy Pelosi. And if the Republicans were united, they could theoretically elect the Speaker. Now, they won't be united. I'm just saying it's going to be a mess, and there's a lot of work to be done. And she has not got a lock on this by any stretch of the imagination.
There was a Monmouth poll that came out saying that asking the question, should House Democrats select Nancy Pelosi to become Speaker? And usually in a poll like this, people just want change. So 45% here said select someone else. No opinion is at 38%, which is pretty high, and only 17% said proactively, elect Pelosi. But aren't they in a little bit of a fix? Because if Pelosi can't get 218, do the Democrats have somebody that could?
Well, I'm sure they could, because she's a polarizing figure. The problem is she's got 26 people who've explicitly said on the record, I will not support her. Now, how they get past that is beyond me, particularly those that are in Republican-leaning districts who've said I'm not going to support her or I want change. What happens if they go home and say, well, you know what? That's what I said during the campaign, but the very first vote that I made when I got into Congress violated that.
Well, like Kyrsten Sinema, the new senator from Arizona, said she will support Chuck Schumer, and she had said she would not on the campaign trail. So there's that to point out. Let's ask you about Florida. No one knows Florida like Karl Rove. Recounts. We're less than an hour away. From 2000 to 2015, there have been 27 statewide recounts. OK, so the average total shift in votes, just 282 or 0.02%. The largest shift was 0.11% in a Vermont auditor's race in 2006. And by vote, 1,247 in the Florida 2000 recount, which, of course, I know you remember. So for context, Rick Scott leads Bill Nelson by 0.0001% or something like 13,000 votes. Now, you know, math is not my strong point, but even I can do that math. We have the graph here, 50.07 to 49.92. But we're talking thousands of votes, not hundreds of votes here. So do you think the Republicans will just have to wait this out and believe that they'll come out the winner?
Well, wait it out. If by wait it out you mean watch for everything that the Democrats try to do or that the election judge in Broward, the election supervisor in Broward County tries to do to get additional votes counted that are illegal votes or that are votes that are not conformity with state law, then yeah, if by wait you mean just sort of sit on the sidelines,
no.
Because they're going to be trying. We learned today, the newspaper in Naples, that the Democrats in 4 counties, Citrus, Broward, Okaloosa and Santa Rosa, the last 2 in the Panhandle, the other 2 in South Florida, the Democratic officials sent out misleading guidance after the election in order to try and get people to, in essence, cure any problems they had with their absentee ballots in violation of state law. So the Democrats have been trying in Broward County. I think there's been a clear attempt. I'm amazed at the amount of coverage nationwide that has ignored the fact there has been systematic breakdowns and violations of state rules, from everything from copying absentee ballots without having witnesses present to not allowing the party observers to be in the counting room and to listen and hear and see everything that's happening, to literally the election supervisor taking ballots about which there's a question that have to be submitted to a canvassing board this week, and instead deciding that she's going to unilaterally decide those are valid ballots and then stuffing them into the pile of valid ballots so you can't ever draw them out again. This has been systematic time after time after time in Broward County and to a lesser extent in Palm Beach County. And even Hillsborough County this week tried to keep the party observers, the 2 party observers, from observing all that was going on in the room. That's in violation of state law.
And it's important to point out that is part of the full story, because you don't necessarily get that everywhere when you're reading this.
No.
We appreciate you coming on. Karl Rove, thank you.
Thank you, Dana.
Fox News alert: the Treasury Department issuing a series of sanctions today against 17 people for their alleged roles in the killing of Jamal Khashoggi. This as the Saudi Arabian government indicts 11 people in the murder of the dissident Washington Post columnist. Khashoggi was killed by Saudi agents inside a consulate building in Turkey. Saudi prosecutors saying the murder was a decision made that day.
On the crime day morning, the head of the negotiation team checked up the place and figured out that it will not be possible to force the victim to return back to Saudi Arabia. At that moment, he decided to kill him immediately.
Benjamin Hall covering this for us. Benjamin, what do these sanctions mean?
I think, Dana, first and foremost, they mean that 6 long weeks after Khashoggi was murdered, we're finally starting to see an international response to this. And we're also starting to see the full Saudi investigation coming out. What these U.S. sanctions mean, and they target 17 Saudis who were pictured coming into Istanbul earlier that day, is that they freeze any assets that those individuals may have in the U.S. They prohibit any American from doing business with them. And today, the State Department released a statement about it saying, quote, "Our action today is an important step in responding to Khashoggi's killing. The State Department will continue to seek all relevant facts, consult with Congress and work with other nations to hold accountable those involved in the killing of Jamal Khashoggi." Today, Saudi Arabia also claimed that the team that carried this out was rogue, and that they had intended to forcibly return Khashoggi to Saudi Arabia, but that it became apparent that was going to be impossible, and they killed him then and there. Then they say that he was injected with an overdose of sedatives, his body cut up, given to a local collaborator who took it away, which is why they still haven't found the body. Dana?
So, Benjamin, have the Saudis explained why he was killed?
Well, they gave an explanation for why this rogue team thought he should be killed, and that is they claim that they thought he was being co-opted by other countries, working for other countries, and that he had become a national security threat to Saudi Arabia. Today, though, the foreign minister spoke out, making it clear the royal family was not involved.
His Royal Highness the Crown Prince has nothing to do with this issue. In fact, the National Security Advisor in the U.S. said this. This was a rogue operation.
So this morning, the Saudi prosecutor identified 11 culprits. It is seeking the death penalty for 5 of them, among them the Deputy Intelligence Chief of Saudi Arabia. That's the man they claim organized the whole affair. But Turkey's still not satisfied with Saudi version of events. They want more. They want these people extradited to face trial in Turkey. Remember, this comes 4 weeks after Secretary Pompeo visited Saudi Arabia to get answers, 2 weeks after Gina Haspel went there. So really a sense now that there is movement happening. U.S., Turkey, Saudi Arabia, all trying to move forward on this case. Dana?
Thank you, Benjamin.
In the season, certainly a nor'easter. It's going to be windy as the storm winds up this afternoon. Temperature-wise, you see most of these areas right around that freezing mark. If you get below freezing, then we can start to see some of that snow stick on the ground. We saw that across a lot of places, including back towards St. Louis, where it's been one of the biggest impacted areas, and they still have snow falling there right now. But you see snow all across interior sections, and we'll start off as a little bit of snow across the coast and then transition into rain as kind of a warm front moves over. This is how that plays out. Snow's falling here in New York City. Go to far interior sections, you'll remain all snow all the time. But eventually this afternoon, temps start to warm up. So Philadelphia, you'll be up to 45. Your snow will be gone. New York up to 40. The big problem is a lot of these areas, when they do get the snow along the I-95 corridor, especially Connecticut up towards Boston, it's going to come down really hard for a couple of
against him as untrue and as an attempt to besmirch his reputation. Listen here.
I have never struck a woman. I never will strike a woman. I have been an advocate for women's rights my entire career, and I'm going to continue to be an advocate. I am not going to be intimidated from stopping what I am doing.
Now, the incident allegedly happened at Avenatti's home here in L.A., and police say there were visible injuries to the alleged victim. That person has not been publicly identified. Avenatti's estranged wife said she was not involved, and his first wife defended him in a tweet, saying he has never been abusive and, quote, is a good man. And Avenatti himself, Dana, tweeted a couple of hours ago to complain about what he called bogus facts and inaccurate reporting, Dana.
And we have also heard, Jonathan, today from his most famous client.
We have indeed. Avenatti became famous, of course, representing Stormy Daniels. She is the porn actress who alleges she had an affair with Donald Trump in 2006. Daniels issued a statement today saying she will reserve judgment regarding what she termed serious and troubling allegations against Avenatti, and she added, quote,
I do not condone violence against women, and if these allegations prove true, I will be seeking new representation. Avenatti, by the way, Dana, due back in court December 5th. His presidential ambitions may have just taken quite a hit. Dana?
Indeed. Thank you, Jonathan. Democrats flipped the House. So what does that mean when it comes to changes to your health care? We'll debate. Plus, a conservative case for criminal justice reform. Senator Mike Lee joins us to explain. And back in Florida, legal wrangling and equipment malfunctions as the 3 p.m. recount deadline is now just about half an hour away.
We're going to give it our best shot. But the reality is that we were very close 2 nights ago, and then our machines went down. It was not for lack of human effort.
If you are considering silver for your savings and retirement accounts, here is an amazing offer from Lear Capital. Now you can receive $200, $500, up to $2,000 worth of these all-new silver Snowy Owl coins free with a qualifying purchase. The Snowy Owl is made from the finest silver of any coin in the world. Its popular 1.5-ounce size makes it both valuable and affordable. And because it comes with a government guarantee, it's IRA eligible. With the price of silver so low, now is the perfect time to stop considering silver and own it. Call Lear Capital at 1-800-769-8500 for this exclusive report, Sky High Silver, and ask how you can get up to $2,000 worth of silver Snowy Owl coins free with a qualifying purchase. Plus, for a limited time, you can own this premium 10-ounce silver Snowy Owl coin. Supply is limited, so call now. 1-800-769-8500. 1-800-769-8500.
Meat Sharks be headed for another recount, this time by hand. The current totals in that race, less than 0.2% apart. Phil Keating is live at the Palm Beach County Board of Elections in Riviera Beach. Phil.
Dana, it is not official yet, but all indications are that come the top of the hour, Palm Beach County could very well be the only one out of 67 Florida counties not to make the recount deadline. This is the big warehouse here in Palm Beach County where they began recounting on Saturday night. It is also where these old and outdated machines broke down Tuesday night, setting them back a day. This room remained totally empty all day yesterday. No workers, no recounting, despite the huge pressure. The superintendent of elections explains that was because she decided to give her staff some time off to eat and sleep.
The reality is that we were very close 2 nights ago, and then our machines went down. It was not for lack of human effort. The human effort was there, and we physically were so close to it when our machines went down.
This afternoon, Governor Rick Scott, who as a candidate in this runoff, tweeted this: with over 2/3 of the machine recount completed, our margin of victory has grown. It's time for Senator Bill Nelson to end this recount. The two big races in the state with all the national recount attention are the governor's race, where Republican Ron DeSantis leads Tallahassee Mayor Andrew Gillum by 33,000 votes, and the Senate race between Governor Scott and Democratic incumbent Bill Nelson. Each candidate has filed numerous lawsuits in the past week. Currently, Scott has a 12,000 vote lead after round 1 of counting, with the margin for another recount by hand. And that could be ordered to happen tonight, a hand recount for the Senate race for all of the counties in the state of Florida. A federal judge has now denied Nelson's motion up in Tallahassee to drop the deadline statewide for every county until every single county is 100% complete with its recount. Still to come at 4 o'clock, though, is a hearing in the same courtroom to allow Palm Beach County alone to forget about the deadline and resume recounting here. And that was followed by a Democrat who was behind by 37 votes in a local state house race here. Right. Who didn't believe he was ever going to get his race recounted because it was down on the list of priorities. We are expecting Susan Booker, the superintendent of elections, to perhaps address the media here right after 3 o'clock. And we will be bringing it to you live if and when that happens.
Just 26 minutes away. Okay, thank you, Phil. Outside of Florida, votes are still being counted in House races from coast to coast right now. 7 contests are undecided. The Republican candidate leads in 4 and the Democrat in 3. Since Monday, 3 races have been called. The winners, all Democrats and first-time congressmen. Maine's 2nd district decided just 2 hours ago and by 1 vote. New Jersey and California had races called earlier this week. Democrats have gained 35 seats in the House since Election Day. Republicans are hoping for bipartisan support on some health care proposals before they lose control of the House. But they seem unlikely to get much help from Democrats. The Washington Post laying out some top priorities, like reversing a new rule forcing drug makers to give deeper discounts to Medicare patients who reach a coverage gap known as the donut hole. Also passing the popular CREATES Act, which tries to even the playing field for generic drug developers. And repealing the medical device sales tax. Democratic Senator Joe Manchin says it may take President Trump to get it done.
People were saying very succinctly and clearly, we want health care fixed. And we can do that. And I've asked the president, he could be the Mr. Repair Care. We'll call it Trump Repair Care because he could fix this to where it basically reduces the rates, it protects people with pre-existing condition.
Marianne Marsh was a senior advisor to Secretary John Kerry. Liam Donovan is a National Review commentator and a former NRSC committee. That's a senatorial committee, of course. All right, let me just start with you, Marianne. The Democrats now, they're in pole position. They ran on health care. There's these 3 bills that might seem kind of minor in the big scheme of things, but the Democrats now look like they might want to hold off and wait for a single-payer vote after the first of the year. Your thoughts on that?
Well, I agree with you. I think they might want to hold off, but I don't think it's about single payer. I don't even think it's about Medicare for all. I think what you'll see the Democrats do first and foremost is, as Joe Manchin just referenced, to make sure that there's coverage of pre-existing conditions. That is the issue in healthcare. Healthcare was the #1 issue in every poll with every voter, but it was pre-existing conditions that really drove that debate. So I would expect a Democratic Congress to pass that legislation that would mandate every state and every health insurance plan to cover them, and I would expect lots of Republican votes because all these Republican candidates suddenly, after voting against it for years, said they were going to do it too.
Well, and Liam, do you think that the Republicans will just want to get this one crossed off their list and vote on the pre-existing condition issue and then maybe try to get these other 3 done?
Look, I think they call it lame duck for a reason. These are typically lame sessions. There's not a ton that gets done. But I agree with Marianne. I think smart Democrats know they don't win on single payer. That's something Republicans want to talk about. Right. When you're talking about drug prices, when you're talking about pre-existing conditions, that's where Democrats are on firmer ground, and that's where they want to go in the new Congress.
The other thing I wanted to ask you about is gun control legislation. I'm just really interested in all of this. There's this back and forth between the NRA and a doctor out of Philly. The NRA saying someone should tell self-important anti-gun doctors to stay in their lane. Half of the articles in Annals of Internal Medicine are pushing for gun control. Most upsetting, however, the medical community seems to have consulted no one but themselves. And one of the doctors, Adam Shiroff, saying, I'll stay in my lane when you pry the life-saving instruments from my cold, dead hands. Josh Crawshar wrote in the National Review that Michael Bloomberg's Independence USA PAC, it funded a lot of these Democratic candidates. It won 21 of 24 House races, nearly all of them in closely contested districts. So I'm wondering, Marianne, if you think that the Democrats will try to push for gun control earlier than later.
I do. There's renewed momentum for gun control. Remember, the vast majority of people in this country want gun control. And look at this election year. There were the tragic bookends, the beginning of the year in February with the Parkland High School shooting. We ended the election cycle, sadly, with a shooting in a synagogue and a club in California. And people have had it. And I love the fact that these doctors have taken on the NRA, posting selfies in emergency rooms and elsewhere in their blood-drenched surgical gowns, after they've treated a victim of gun violence, and many of them don't make it. So people are rising up and have had enough, and there are Democrats now controlling the House. Something can get done.
Liam, in some of these districts, an F rating from the NRA would have ensured that a Republican could not win there, or the Democrat couldn't win if they had an F rating. Maybe not so much in some of these suburban districts now that the Republicans need to pay attention to. But your thoughts on this, as the FNC voter analysis showed that 61% of people believe that gun laws should be more strict.
I think it depends on the district, but you saw among those who survived this sort of Whole Foods wave that rushed through the suburbs, you need to do something in a cycle like that to distinguish yourself as a different type of Republican. That can be on gun control, it can be on immigration, it can be on environmental issues, but the folks that survived, people like Brian Fitzpatrick in the Philly suburbs, people like Brian Mast in South Florida, they were able to distinguish themselves on this issue. So I think it's something definitely to watch as Republicans try to keep a coalition together, particularly in the suburbs.
Marianne, with Mike Bloomberg having that kind of success this past effort, he announced last Friday, I believe, or maybe it was on Monday, I was away 2 days, so I'm a little confused, that he is going to align with the Democrats. And do you think that because he made that kind of progress, that he has a chance to actually be a big competitor in the primary process?
Well, he certainly got the money. He's certainly invested in a lot of races. And there seemed to have been almost a competition between Bloomberg and Steyer, who could write the most checks at the end. It's clear dozens of Democrats now, Mike Bloomberg, looking at running for president. Everybody's going to explore it. I think the world's going to look very different once the Mueller report comes out. But he'll be up there with everybody else. A lot of people in New Hampshire coming through Boston on their way up to talk. Mike Bloomberg certainly will be one of them in the beginning.
All right, Marianne Marsh and Liam Donovan, love having you. Thank you. Chris Wallace will interview President Trump for Fox News Sunday, and I'm sure they'll have plenty to talk about. I'm not going to miss this one. Check your local listings for when you can catch it. That's this Sunday. Facebook firing back against a scathing report on how it handled the 2016 election meddling crisis. Amid claims the social media giant's leaders try to delay, deny, and deflect the scandal, Christina Partsinevelos with the Fox Business Network is live with the story. Christina, you just got off a conference call with Facebook. I do have to wonder, like, they always seem so surprised that something happened. They're like so surprised.
Yeah, they do. And you had Zuckerberg on the call there. It's actually still going on right now, but he addressed it right away, saying that, yes, in the past, Facebook has been slow to react. And I think we can play an audio of that call. So let's roll to that right quickly.
I've said many times before that we were too slow to spot Russian interference, too slow to understand it, and too slow to get on top of it. And we've certainly stumbled along the way. But to suggest that we weren't interested in knowing the truth, or that we wanted to hide what we knew, or that we tried to prevent investigations is simply untrue.
That seems to ring true to me. I mean, based on my experience with them. I mean, what is new in this story?
It's because they knew about the Russian election a year in advance, and they didn't tell the public. They found out spring 2016, and they waited an entire year. That's some of the points that were in this New York Times article. The fact that they hid it from us, that you have this conference call, they're talking about how they're working on accountability, transparency, they're releasing all these notes, they're hiring more staff, they're working on artificial intelligence. They had some numbers, 9.4 million pieces of terrorism content, and not to be alarmed, it's just because their systems are better at getting the old pieces that are online and getting those. They also canceled 1.5 billion of fake accounts in just the past 2 quarters alone. And that's the latest from this conference call. But in the New York Times article, it was about the Russian meddling. It was also about the fact that they were concerned about then president candidate Trump's post about a ban on Muslim immigrants. And they decided, hey, we're not going to take it down because we don't want backlash from Republicans. And the third one.
Well, also, I think that if I could just point out, though, like when they in the article, it says to me that Facebook was like, you might be concerned about what President Trump is saying, but he has a right to say it. Like you can't
go
prevent somebody from being able to do that. So doesn't that work in their favor a little bit?
Yes, but then you had a conflict of interest on the higher ups in showing that Zuckerberg was offended by President Trump's comment. And the other big thing is that they hired a PR firm to make links with George Soros on an anti-Facebook movement and put the blame and deflect the blame on other tech firms. This is coming from a New York Times long piece.
Yeah, it was long. I read it last night in the airport. All right, thank you, Christina. Thanks. Senator Mike Lee says Congress has a rare opportunity for real criminal justice reform. He'll join me next to tell me how he plans to do this. And be sure to check out my weekly podcast with Chris Stirewalt. I'll tell you what, in the new episode out this evening, we talk about the potential challenge from Representative Marcia Fudge to Nancy Pelosi. It's available for download on iTunes or wherever you listen.
We're reporting on several major news stories next hour. We're minutes away from the deadline for the Florida recount to end. And we're expecting a news conference from Palm Beach County, where supervisors have said they probably will not get it done in time. So what happens now in the undecided races? And in California, Ventura County, a funeral service set to begin for a hero sergeant who died trying to stop the massacre at the Borderline Bar. Those stories and more on Shepard Smith reporting.
President Trump forging ahead with his efforts at criminal justice reform. The First Step Act is a bipartisan piece of legislation aimed at giving judges more sentencing leeway and improving rehabilitation programs for prisoners.
The bill includes reasonable sentencing reforms while keeping dangerous and violent criminals off our streets. In many respects, we're getting very much tougher on the truly bad criminals, of which, unfortunately, there are many. But we're treating people differently for different crimes.
I'm joined now by Republican Senator Mike Lee from Utah. I know, sir, this has been a long-time issue for you. You might have been surprised, but maybe not, that the New York Times today editorializing reform advocates expressed optimism that the years-long impasse on this issue would at last break now that Mr. Sessions was no longer crusading against a deal, at least not in his capacity as the nation's top law enforcement official. Matthew Whitaker, the acting attorney general, has met with Mr. Kushner and is said to be more amenable to change. Tell me what you think has made the difference here.
Well, first of all, President Trump is a trusted voice when it comes to keeping the American people safe. He's always taken the approach that we've got to protect people from the dangers of crime, and especially violent crime. He understands that we can do this. We can do this specifically by passing this bill because it lowers the risk of recidivism of offenders who are already in prison, committing crimes again when they get out. And it also gives judges more discretion so that we can reserve our bed space in prisons for the truly dangerous offenders out there.
There was just a new statement, though, from the National Sheriffs of America saying this legislation creates a high-risk path for dangerous criminals with gun crime histories to early release from prison. This amounts to a social experiment with the safety of our communities and the lives of sheriffs, deputies, and police officers in the balance. So there's a little bit of opposition from this, and do you think you can overcome it?
Yes, I think we can. And look, I respect the sheriffs of this country and those who are affiliated with the association. We are working with them, trying to resolve their concerns, and we think we can get them there. Regardless, we've got the two largest law enforcement organizations in the entire country, including the Fraternal Order of Police, who are in support of this. We've got federal prosecutors from all over the country who are in support of this. This is a good bill, and I urge the majority leader to bring it up soon and let us get it passed.
One of the ways I think about this is as a pro-life issue, right? Because it's the whole life, if you care about the entire person's life. And you talk a little bit about the importance of marriage and how marriages fall apart when people are in prison. Some of these sentencing are just unfair compared to what other people have had to deal with. And there are judges across the country who say, I don't want to have to put this person away for 15, 20 years, but that's what the law says. Is that the kind of thing that you want to get across?
Yeah, it's exactly what we're trying to get across. I was motivated in part by what I saw as a federal prosecutor. I saw a young man named Weldon Angelos who received a minimum mandatory sentence of 55 years in federal prison for selling 3 dime bags of marijuana over a 72-hour period. The federal district judge took the unusual step of issuing an opinion disagreeing with the sentence he was about to impose. And then he said something that would haunt me ever since then. This is nearly 15 years ago. Only Congress can fix this problem. So when I got to the Senate 8 years ago, I resolved that I would take those words to heart and have been trying to fix this problem. That's what this bill does.
And what's the next step that needs to happen? The House needs to vote?
And the next step that needs to happen is that once the legislation is finalized and filed today, we'll conduct a whip count. And my hope, my expectation, is that the majority leader in the Senate will bring it up for a vote, and I believe it will pass overwhelmingly.
And then the House side looks good, too?
The House side looks good. This is based on the chassis of the First Step Act that passed the House a couple of months ago with a bipartisan supermajority vote of 360.
Yes, I think we had Doug Collins on when that passed. So anyways, it's very exciting, very interesting. I know there's some opposition. We'll follow the debate. We appreciate you being here, Senator Mike Lee.
Thank you, Dana.
The FDA announcing another aggressive effort to curb teenage vaping, and an emotional story of a California garbage truck driver's heroic actions. You'll want to see that. Now a look at other stories you should know about. It's our Daily 3. Number 1, British Prime Minister Theresa May is rejecting calls to quit or change course on Brexit, saying she believes the deal her government struck with the EU is the right one. 2 cabinet ministers have resigned today. Number 2, the feds are cracking down on vaping products aimed at young people. The FDA moving ahead with new regulations as new data shows a 77% increase in the use of e-cigarettes among high school students over the past year. And number 3, Vice President Pence says a second summit between President Trump and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un is likely next year. He says the meeting would need to result in a detailed list of North Korea's nuclear weapons sites. Crews are gaining ground on the deadly